Renault is a French multinational automobile manufacturer. The company was founded on February 25, 1899 by Louis Renault, Marcel Renault, and Fernand Renault, and to this very day the company is still alive and healthy. So, how did it become so popular? Let's find out. Founding in early years from 1898 to 1918, the Renault Corporation was founded on February 25, 1899 as Société Renault Faire by Louis Renault and his brothers Marcel and Fernand. Louis was a bright, aspiring young engineer who had already designed and built several prototypes before teaming up with his brothers, who had owned their business skills working for their father's textile firm. While Louis handled design and production, Marcel and Fernand managed the business. The first Renault car, the Renault Voltaire 1CV, was sold to a friend of Louis' father, after giving him a test ride on December 24, 1898. In 1903, Renault began to manufacture its own engines. Until then, it had purchased them from De Dion Boutin. The first major volume sale came in 1905 when Société des Automobiles de Place bought Renault AG1 cars to establish a fleet of taxis. These vehicles were later used by the French military to transport troops during World War I, which earned them the nickname Taxi de la Marne. By 1907, a significant percentage of London and Paris taxis had been built by Renault. Renault was also the best-selling foreign brand in New York in 1907 and 1908. In 1908, the company produced 3,575 units, becoming the country's largest car manufacturer. The brothers recognized the value of publicity and that participation in motor racing could generate for their vehicles. Renault made itself known through succeeding in the first city-to-city races held in Switzerland, producing rapid sales growth. Both Louis and Marcel raced company vehicles, but Marcel was killed in an accident during the 1903 Paris-Madrid race. Although Louis never raced again, his company remained very involved, including Francis winning the first Grand Prix motor racing event in a Renault AK-90CV in 1906. Louis took full control of the company as the only remaining brother in 1906 when Fernand retired for health reasons. Fernand died in 1909 and Louis became the sole owner, renaming the company Société des Automobiles Renault, which in English translates to Renault Automobile Company. Renault fostered its reputation for innovation from very early on. At the time, cars were luxury items manufactured without assembly line advances. The price of the smallest Renaults at the time was 3,000 francs, an amount equal to 10 years' pay for the average worker. In 1905, the company introduced mass production techniques and Taylorism in 1913. In 1911, Renault visited Henry Ford at the Highland Park factory and adopted some of the manufacturing principles from his trip. Renault manufactured buses and commercial cargo vehicles in the pre-war years. The first real commercial truck from the company was introduced in 1906. During World War I, it branched out into auto-munition, military aircraft engines. The first Rolls-Royce aircraft engines were modeled and inspired by Renault air-cooled aircraft V8 units and vehicles such as the revolutionary Renault FT tank. The company's military designs were so successful that Louis was awarded the Legion of Honor for his company's contributions. The company exported engines to American automobile manufacturers for use in such automobiles as the GJG, which used a Renault 26 horsepower 19 kilowatt or 40 HP 30 kilowatts four-cylinder engine. Interwar years from 1919 to 1938. Louis Renault enlarged Renault's scope after 1918, producing agriculture and industrial machinery. The war from 1914 until 1918 led to many new products. The first Renault tractor, the Type GP, was produced between 1919 and 1930. It was based on the FT tank. Renault struggled to compete with the increasingly popular small, affordable people's cars, while problems with the United States stock market and the workforce slowed the company's growth. Renault also had to find a way to distribute its vehicles more efficiently. In 1920, Louis signed one of its first distribution contracts with Gustave Guédet, an entrepreneur from Amiens, France, which they still maintain a relationship. The pre-First World War cars had a distinctive front shape caused by positioning the radiator behind the engine to give it a so-called coal scuttle bonnet. This continued through the 1920s. Only in 1930 did all models place the radiator at the front. The bonnet badge changed from circular to the familiar and continuing diamond shape in 1925. The practice of installing the radiator behind the engine against the firewall continued during the 1950s and 1960s on vehicles where the engine was installed longitudinally in the rear of the vehicle. Renault introduced new models at the Paris Motor Show, which was held in September or October of the year. This led to confusion about model years. For example, a 1927 model was mostly produced in 1928. Renault cars during the time period had two model lines. The economy 4-cylinder engine models that in the 1930s became the Suffix Porter, and the luxury 6-cylinder models that were initially sold with the Suffix 6 that later became the Suffix Stella. For example, in 1928, when Renault produced 45,809 cars, its 7 models started with a 6CV, a 10CV, the Mono6, 16CV, the Viva6, the 1822CV, and the 40CV. Renault offered 8 body styles. The longer rolling chassis were available to coach builders. The smaller were the most popular, while the least produced was the 1824CV. The most expensive body style in each range was the closed car. Roadsters and Tours torpedoes were the cheapest. The London operation was important to Renault in 1928. The UK market was quite large, and North America also received exports for the luxury car market. Lifted suspensions, enhanced cooling, and special bodies were common on vehicles sold abroad. Exports to the US by 1928 had declined to near zero from their high point prior to World War I. A Type NM 40CV Tour had a US list price of over $4,600 US, which is $81,623, which is $81,623 in 2023 dollars. About the same as a Cadillac V12, Packard 8, Fiat 520, or Delahaye closed 7-seat limousines like the Renault Superstella started at $6,000 US, which is $106,465 in $106,465 in 2023 dollars. Cars were conservatively engineered and built. The Renault Viva 6 model PG1 was sold as the executive sports model beginning in 1927. Lighter weight factory steel bodies powered by a 3,180 cubic centimeter cc 6-cylinder motor provided a formula that lasted until the Second World War. The Grand Lux Renaults, those with a wheelbase over 12 foot, which is 3.7 meters, were produced in small numbers in 2 major types, 6 and 8 cylinder. The 1927 6-cylinder Grand Renault models NM, PI, and PZ introduced the new 3-spring rear suspension that considerably aided stability that was needed since some vehicles surpassed 90 mph, which is 140 kilometers per hour. The straight 8-cylinder Renault Stella was introduced in 1929 and expanded to a range culminating in 1939 Super Stella. Coach builders included Kellner, Labourette, J. Rothschild as seals, and Renault bodies. Closed car Renault bodies were often trimmed with interior woodwork by Rothschild. In 1928, Renault introduced an upgraded specification to its Stella line. The Viva Stella's Grand Renaults had upgraded interior fittings and a smaller star fitted above the front hood logo. This proved to be a winning differentiator, and in the 1930s, all cars changed to the Stella suffix from the previous two Alpha character model identifiers. The Grand Renaults were built using a considerable amount of aluminum. Engines, brakes, transmissions, floor and running boards, and all external body panels were aluminum. Of the few that were built, many went to scrap to aid the war effort. In 1931, Renault introduced diesel engines for its commercial vehicles. Renault was one of the few French vehicle manufacturers that pursued the production of aircraft engines after World War I. In the late 1920s, it attempted to produce a high-power military engine to compete with the American Pratt & Whitney units, which proved unsuccessful, although its civil engines achieved better results. In the 1930s, the company took over the aircraft manufacturer Cardin, focusing its production in smaller airplanes, acquired a stake in Air France, and partnered to establish airmail company Air Bleu. Renault's Cardin airplane settled several speed world records during the 1930s. Renault continued developing tanks as part of France's renaming effort, including the D1 and the FT's replacement, the R35. During the late 1920s and early 1930s, Renault was surpassed by Citroën as the largest car manufacturer in France. Citroën models at the time were more innovative and popular than Renault's. However, by mid-1930s, the French manufacturers were hit by the Great Depression. Renault could initially offset losses through its tractors, railroad, and weaponry businesses, while Citroën filed for bankruptcy and was later acquired by Michelin. Renault became the largest car manufacturer, a position it would keep until the 1980s. Renault was finally affected by the Great Depression economic crisis in 1936. The company spun off Cardin and its foundry and aircraft engine divisions into related but autonomous operations, keeping its core automotive business. Between 1936 and 1938, a series of labor disputes, strikes, and worker unrest spread throughout the French automobile industry. The disputes were eventually quashed by Renault in a particularly intransigent way, and over 2,000 people lost their jobs. World War II and aftermath from 1939 to 1944. After the French capitulation in 1940, Louis Renault refused to produce tanks for Nazi Germany, which took control of his factories. As Renault was manufacturing the Renault UE tank for the Allies, he produced trucks. As Renault was manufacturing the Renault UE tank for Allies, he produced trucks instead. On March 3, 1942, the British Royal Air Force, RAF, launched 235 low-level bombers at the Ile-Seguin-Valencourt Paris plant, the largest number aimed at a single target during the war. 460 metric tons, 450 long tons, 510 short tons of bombs were dropped on the plant and the surrounding area, causing extensive damage along with heavy civilian casualties. Renault resolved to rebuild the factory as quickly as possible, but bombardments continued a year later, on April 4th, this time delivered by the Americans, and on September 3rd and 15th, 1943. A few weeks after the liberation of Paris, at the start of September 1944, the factory gates at Renault's Valencourt plant reopened. Operations restarted slowly in an atmosphere poisoned by polluting and political conspiracy. In 1936, Valencourt factory had been the scene of violent political and industrial unrest that had surfaced under Léon Blum's Popular Front government. The political jolting and violence that followed liberation ostensibly reflected the rivalries between capitalist collaboration and communist resistance. Many of the scores settled predated the invasion. Responding to the chaotic situation at Renault, a September 27, 1944 meeting of the Council of Ministers took place under de Gaulle's presidency. Post-war European politics had quickly become polarized between communists and anti-communists, and in France, de Gaulle was keen to resist Communist Party attempts to monopolize the political dividends available to resistance heroes. Politically, Valancourt was a communist stronghold. The government decided to requisition the Renault factories. A week later, on October 4th, Pierre Lafachou, a resistance leader with a background in engineering and top-level management, was appointed provisional administrator of the firm, assuming his responsibilities at once. Meanwhile, provisional government accused Louis Renault of collaborating with the Germans. In the frenzied atmosphere of those early post-liberation days, with many wild accusations, Renault was advised by his lawyers to present himself to a judge. He appeared before Judge Marcel Martin on September 22, 1944, and was arrested on September 23, 1944, as were several other French automobile industrial leaders. Renault's harsh handling of the 1936 to 1938 airstrikes had left him without political allies, and no one came to his aid. He was incarcerated at Friends Prison, where he died on October 24, 1944, under unclear circumstances, while awaiting trial. On January 1, 1945, by de Gaulle's decree, the company was posthumously expropriated from Louis Renault. On January 16, 1945, it was formally nationalized as Régie Nationale des Unités Renault. Renaults were the only factories permanently expropriated by the French government. In subsequent years, the Renault family tried to have the nationalization recited by French courts and received compensation. In 1945 and again in 1961, the courts responded that they had no authority to review the government's actions. Post-war resurgence from 1945 to 1971. Under the leadership of Pierre Lafachou, Renault experienced both a commercial resurgence and labor unrest that was to continue into the 1980s. In the early 1950s, Renault assembled at least two models, Standard Saloon and Deluxe Saloon in England. In secrecy during the war, Louis Renault had developed the rear-engine 4CV, which was subsequently launched under Lafachou in 1946. Renault debuted its flagship model, the largely conventional 2-liter 4-cylinder Renault Forget, which was on from 1951 to 1960, shortly thereafter. The 4CV proved a capable rival for cars such as the Morris Minor and Volkswagen Beetle. Its sales of more than 500,000 ensured its production until 1961. After the success of the 4CV, Lafachou continued to defy the post-war French Ministry of Industrial Production, which had wanted to convert Renault solely to truck manufacture by directing development of its successor. He oversaw the prototyping of the Dauphine until its death, enlisting the help of artist Paul Morat in pioneering the company's textile and color division. The Dauphine was sold well as the company expanded production and sales further abroad, including Africa and North America. The Dauphine sold well initially in the US, although it subsequently became outdated against the increased competition, including from the country's nascent domestic compacts such as the Chevrolet Coviar. Renault also sold the Renault Caravelle Roadster, which was called the Fluoride outside North America. During the 1950s, Renault absorbed two small French heavy vehicle manufacturers, Somolati, and in 1955 merged them with its own truck and bus division to form the Société Anonyme des Véhicules Industriels et des Équipements Mécaniques, Savium. Renault then launched two successful cars, the Renault 4 from 1961 to 1992, a practical competitor for the likes of the Citroën 2CV and the rear-engined Renault 8. The larger Renault 10 followed the success of the R8 and was the last rear-engined Renault. The company achieved success with the more modern and more upmarket Renault 16, a pioneering hatchback launched in 1966, followed by the smaller Renault 6. On January 16, 1970, the manufacturer celebrated the 25th anniversary of its 1945 rebirth as the nationalized Régie Nationale des Unités Renault. The 1960s had been a decade of aggressive growth. A few months earlier, in October 1969, the manufacturer had launched the Renault 12, combining the engineering philosophy of its hatchbacks with the more conservative three-box design. The four-door Renault 12 model fit between the Renault 6 and Renault 16. The model was a success. 1970 was also the first year during which Renault produced more than 1 million cars in a single year, building 1,055,803. Modern era from 1972 to 1980. The company's compact and economical Renault 5 model, launched in January 1972, was another success anticipating the 1973 energy crisis. Throughout the 1970s, the R4, R5, R6, R12, R15, R16, and R17 maintained Renault's production with new models including the Renault 18 and Renault 20. During the mid-70s, the already broad-based company diversified into more industries and continued to expand globally, including Southeast Asia. The energy crisis led Renault to again attempt to attack the North American market. Despite the Dauphine's success in the United States in the late 1950s and an unsuccessful assembly project in Saint-Bruno de Montrevel, Quebec, from 1964 to 1972, Renault began to disappear from North America at the end of the decade. Renault acquired a controlling stake in Automobiles Alpine in 1973, and over the decades, Renault developed a collaborative partnership with Nash Motors Rambler and its successor American Motors Corporation AMC. From 1962 until 1967, Renault assembled complete knockdown CKD kits of the Rambler Classic sedans in its factory in Belgium. Renault did not have large or luxury cars in its product line, and the Rambler Renault was positioned as an alternative to the Mercedes-Benz Fintail cars. Later, Renault continued to sell a hybrid of AMC's Rambler American and Rambler Classic called the Renault Torino in Argentina, sold through IKA Renault. Renault partnered with AMC on other projects such as a rotary concept engine in the late 1960s. In the late 1960s and 1970s, the company established subsidiaries in Eastern Europe, most notably Dacia in Romania and South America, many of which remain active, and forged technological cooperation agreements with Volvo and Peugeot. For instance, for the development of the PRV V6 engine, which was used in Renault 30, Peugeot 604, and Volvo 620 in the late 1970s. In the mid-1960s, Renault Australia was set up in Melbourne. The company produced and assembled models including the R8, R10, R12, R16, Sporty R15, R17 Coupes, R18, and R20. The unit closed in 1981, and the factory closed with LNC Industries taking over import and distribution of Renaults in Australia. When Peugeot acquired Citroën and formed PSA, the group's collaboration with Renault was reduced, although established joint production projects were maintained. Prior its merging with Peugeot, Citroën sold to Renault the truck and bus manufacturer Berliet in December 1974, merging it with its subsidiary Savium in 1978 to create Renault Vehicles Industriels, which became the only French manufacturer of heavy commercial vehicles. In 1976, Renault reorganized the company into 4 business areas: automobiles for car and light commercial vehicles or LCVs, finance and services commercial vehicles, coaches and trucks over 2.5 tons GVW, and minor operations under an industrial enterprise division, farm machinery, plastics, foundry, etc. In 1980, Renault produced 2,053,677 cars and LCVs. The cars at the time were the Renault 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and 30. The LCVs were the 4, 5, and 12 Société and Estafette. The company added 54,086 buses, coaches, and trucks. In North America, Renault partnered with American Motors Corporation AMC, lending AMC operating capital and buying a minority 22.5% stake in the company in late 1979. The first Renault model sold through AMC's dealerships were the R5, renamed Renault Lee car. Jeep was keeping AMC afloat until new products, particularly the XJ Cherokee, could be launched. When the bottom fell out of the four-wheel drive 4x4 truck market in early 1980, AMC was in danger of bankruptcy. To protect this investment, Renault bailed AMC out with cash at the price of a controlling 47.5% interest. Renault replaced some AMC executives and José Dudour of Renault became president of AMC. The partnership resulted in marketing of Jeep vehicles in Europe. The Jeep XJ Cherokees may have been a joint AMC Renault project, since some early sketches of the XJ series were made in collaboration by Renault and AMC engineers. AMC insisted that the XJ Cherokee was designed by AMC personnel, even though a former Renault engineer designed the Quadra-Link front suspension for the XJ series. The Jeep also used wheels and seats from Renault, part of AMC's overall strategy to save manufacturing costs by using Renault's parts and engineering expertise when practical. This led to the improvement of the venerable AMC Inline 6, a Renault Bendix-based port electronic fuel injection system, usually called Renix, transformed it into a modern competitive power plant with a jump from 110 to 177 HP, which is 82 to 132 kilowatts, with less displacement from 4.2 to 4.0 liters. The XJC Cherokee concept was conceived in 1983 as a successor to the XJ series, was also a joint collaboration with AMC and Renault engineers until the design was inherited by the Chrysler Corporation in late 1987 after Renault divested AMC, which debuted in 1989 as a Jeep concept. One evolving into the Jeep Grand Cherokee in April 1992. The Renault AMC marketing effort in passenger cars were unsuccessful compared to the popularity of Jeep vehicles. This was because by the time the Renault range was ready, the second energy crisis was over, taking with it much of the desire for economical, compact cars. One exception was the Renault Alliance, an Americanized version of the Renault 9, which debuted for the 1983 model year. Assembled at AMC's Kenosha, Wisconsin plant, the Alliance received Motor Trend's Domestic Car of the Year award in 1983. The Alliance's 72% U.S. content allowed it to qualify as a domestic vehicle, making it the first car with foreign nameplate to win the award. In 2000, Motor Trend did away with separate awards for domestic and imported vehicles. A surprising side effect of the AMC link-up was that Renault felt the effect of the Arab League boycott of companies doing business with Israel, as AMC built Jeeps there under license. Plans to sell Renault 9 in the Middle East were mothballed as a result. Introductions in the US during the 1980s included the Renault Alliance GTA and GTA Convertible, an automatic top convertible with a 2.0-liter engine, big for a car of its class, and the Renault Fugo Coupe. The Alliance was followed by the Encore, US version of the Renault 11, an Alliance-based hatchback. In 1982, Renault became the second European automaker to build cars in the US, after Volkswagen. However, bland styling and poor product quality proved insurmountable. Eventually, Renault sold AMC to Chrysler in 1987 after the assassination of Renault's chairman George Bessy by Action Direct. The Renault Medallion, Renault 21 in Europe, sedan, and wagon was sold from 1987 until 1989 through Jeep Eagle dealerships. Jeep Eagle was the division Chrysler curated out of the former AMC. Renault imports ended after 1989. A completely new full-sized four-door sedan, the Eagle Premier, was developed during the partnership between AMC and Renault. The Premier design, as well as its state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Balmella, Ontario, Canada, were the starting point for the sleek LH sedans such as the Eagle Vision and Chrysler's 300M. In early 1979, as part of its attempts to expand into the U.S. market, Renault bought a 20% stake in the truck manufacturer Mack. The aim of its operations was to make use of the company's extensive dealership network to distribute light trucks. In 1983, Renault increased its stake to Mack to 44.6%. In 1987, it transferred the ownership of a 42% stake to Renault Vehicles Industriels. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Renault increased its involvement in motorsport, with novel intentions such as turbochargers in its Formula One cars. Renault's head of engines, Georges Douin, orchestrated the installation of turbocharged engines across much of the Renault range beginning in 1980. 10% of all turbocharged European cars in 1984 were Renault's. The company's road car designs were revolutionary in other ways also. The Renault Escape was one of its first minivans and was to remain the most well-known minivan in Europe for the next 2 decades. The second generation Renault 5, the European Car of the Year winning Renault 9, the most luxurious Renault yet, the aerodynamic 25 were all released in the early 1980s. At the same time, poor product quality damaged the brand. The ill-fated Renault 14 may have been the culmination of these problems in the early 1980s. Restructuring from 1981 to 1995. Renaults were somewhat successful on both road and track, including the 1984 Escape launch, which was Europe's first multi-purpose vehicle a dozen years before any competitor. Renault was losing $1 billion francs a month, totaling 12.5 billion francs in 1984. The government intervened and Georges Besse was installed as chairman. He set about cutting costs dramatically, selling many of Renault's non-core sets, Volvo, Stake, Gitan, Eurocar, and Renix, withdrawing almost entirely from motorsports, and laying off many employees. This halved the deficit by 1986, but Besse was murdered by the communist terrorist group by Action Directe in November 1986. He was replaced by Raymond Levi, who continued Besse's initiatives, slimming the company enough that by the end of 1987, Renault was more or less financially stable. However, while Besse was convinced that Renault needed a presence in the North American market and wanted to push forward with restructuring AMC, Levi, facing domestic losses from Renault at home and losses from AMC in the US, along with the political climate that led to Besse's assassination, decided to sell AMC to Chrysler that same year. The Renault 9, a small four-door family saloon, was voted European Car of the Year on its 1981 launch. It sold well in France, but eventually eclipsed by its sister vehicle, the Renault 11 hatchback, as the hatchback body style became more popular in the size of the car. The Renault 5 entered its second generation in 1984 and continued to sell well. The long-running Renault 18 was replaced by the Renault 21 early in 1986, adding a 7-seater estate badged as the Nevada or Savannah depending on where it was sold. Renault's top-of-the-range model in the 1980s was the Renault 25, launched at the end of 1983. In 1990, Renault strengthened its collaboration with Volvo by signing an agreement that allowed both companies to reduce vehicle consumption costs and purchasing expenses. Renault had access to Volvo's expertise in upper market segments, and in return, Volvo exploited Renault's designs for low-medium segments. In 1993, the two companies announced their intention to merge operations by January 1st, 1994, and increase their cost shareholding. The French accepted the merger while Volvo shareholders rejected it. A revitalized Renault launched successful new cars in the early 1990s, accompanied by an improved marketing effort on the European market. On European markets, including the 5 replacement, the Cielo, in May 1990. The Cielo was the first new model of a generation that replaced numeric identifiers with traditional nameplates. The Cielo was voted European Car of the Year soon after its launch and was one of Europe's best-selling cars in the 1990s, proving even more popular than its predecessor. Other important launches included the third-generation Escape in 1996 and the innovative Twingo in 1992, the first car to be marketed as a city car MPV multi-purpose vehicle. The Twingo was roomier than any prior cars of its size range. Twingo sales reached 2.4 million in Europe, even though the original was built for continental left-hand drive markets. Privatization and the Alliance era from 1996 to 2019. It was eventually decided that the company's state-owned status was a determinant. By 1994, plans to sell shares to public investors were officially announced. The company was privatized in 1996. This new freedom allowed the company to venture once again into markets in Eastern Europe and South America, including a new factory in Brazil and upgrades for its infrastructure in Argentina and Turkey. In December 1996, General Motors Europe and Renault began to collaborate in the development of LCVs, starting with the second generation of Traffic, codenamed X83. Renault's financial problems were not all fixed by the privatization, and Renault's president, Louis Renault, gave to his then deputy, Carlos Ghosn, the task of confronting them. Ghosn elaborated a plan to cut costs for the period 1998 to 2000, reducing the workforce, revising production process, standardizing vehicle parts, and pushing the launch of new models. The company also undertook organizational changes, introducing a lean production system with delicate responsibilities inspired by Japanese systems, the Renault Production Way, reforming work methods and centralizing research and development as a techno center to reduce vehicle conception costs while accelerating such conception. After Volvo's exit, Renault searched for a new partner to cope with an industry that was consolidating. Talks with BMW, Mitsubishi, Nissan, PSA, and others were held and yielded a relationship with Nissan, whose negotiations with Daimler had stalled. Starting on March 27, 1999, the Renault-Nissan alliance is the first kind of involving a Japanese and French company, including cross-ownership. Renault initially acquired a 36.8% stake at the cost of 2.7 billion euros in Nissan, while Nissan in turn took 15% non-voting stake in Renault. Renault continued to operate as a standalone company, but with the intent to collaborate with this alliance partner to reduce costs. The same year, Renault bought a 51% majority stake of the Romanian company Dacia for 408.5 million euros, thus returning after 30 years, in which time the Romanians had built over 2 million cars that primarily consisted of local versions of the Renault 8, 12, and 20. In 2000, Renault acquired a controlling stake of the newly formed South Korean Samsung Group's automotive division for 59.5 million euros. In Japan, Renault was formerly licensed by Yanase Company, Japan's premier seller of imported cars. However, as a result of Renault's purchase of an interest in Nissan, Yanase canceled its licensing contract with Renault in the spring of 2000, and Nissan took over the sole license. Hence, sales of Renault vehicles in Japan were transferred from Yanase store locations to Nissan Red Stage store locations. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Renault sold various assets to finance inversions and acquisitions, refocusing itself as a car and van manufacturer. In 1999, the company sold its industrial automation subsidiary Renault Automation to Commu, and its engine parts division to TWR Engine Components. In 2001, Renault sold its 50% stake in bus coach manufacturer Airbus to co-owner Iveco and its logistics subsidiary CAT France to Global Automotive Logistics. Following its sale of Renault Vehicles Industriels to Volvo in 2001, the company retained a minority but controlling stake 20% in the Volvo Group. In 2010, Renault reduced its shareholding to 6.5%, and in December 2012 sold its remaining shares. In 2004, Renault sold a 51% majority stake in its agriculture machinery division, Renault Agriculture, to CLAAS in 2006. CLAAS increased its ownership to 80% and in 2008 took full control. In the 21st century, Renault developed a reputation for its distinctive outlandish design. The second generation of Leguana and Megane featured ambitious, angular designs that turned out to be successful. The 2000 Leguana was the second European car to feature keyless entry and ignition. Less successful were the company's more upmarket models. The Aventime, a unique coupe multi-purpose vehicle, sold poorly and was quickly discontinued, while the luxury Vel Estates model also disappointed. However, the design inspired the lines of the second generation Megane, the maker's most successful car. As well as its distinctive styling, Renault was to become known for its car safety by the independent company Euro NCAP. Thus, in 2001, Leguana achieved a 5-star rating. Followed in 2004 by the Modus and acquired control of Avto VAZ in 2008. In April 2010, Renault and Nissan announced an alliance with Daimler. Renault supplied Mercedes-Benz with its brand new 1.6-liter turbo diesel engine, and Mercedes-Benz provided a 2.0-liter 4-cylinder petrol engine to Renault and Nissan. The resulting new alliance was to develop a replacement for the Smart based on the Twingo. In February 2010, Renault opened a new production factory near Tangier, Morocco, with an annual output capacity of 170,000 vehicles. Initially, it manufactured the Dacia Logi and Dacia Docker models, followed in October 2013 by the second generation Dacia Sandero. The output capacity increased to 340,000 vehicles per year with the inauguration of a second production line. The site is located in a dedicated free trade area neighboring Tangier Automotive City. According to Renault, the new factory emits zero carbon and industrial liquid discharges. Over 100,000 vehicles were produced there in 2013. Renault expects to eventually increase production at the Tangier plant to 400,000 vehicles per year. In the 2010s, Renault increased its efforts to gain market share in the Chinese market. In 2013, it formed a joint venture with Dongfeng Motor Group named as Dongfeng Renault based on a failed previous venture with the Chinese company Caijing. In December 2017, it signed an agreement with Brilliance Auto to curate a new joint venture, Renault Brilliance Jinbel, aimed at producing light commercial vehicles and minivans under the Renault Jinbel and Haiyusong marques. In December 2018, Renault announced it would acquire a significant stake in JMCG's electric vehicle subsidiary, JMEV. In July 2019, Renault took a 50% majority stake from JMEV through capital increase. In April 2020, Renault announced it planned to withdraw from the Dongfeng Renault venture, transferring its stake to Dongfeng. In December 2012, the Algeria's National Investment Fund, FNI, the Société Nationale des Véhicules Industriels, SNVI, and Renault signed an agreement to establish a factory near the city of Oran, Algeria, with the aim of manufacturing symbol units from 2014 onwards. The production output was estimated at 25,000 vehicles. The Algerian state has a 51% stake in the facility. In September 2013, Renault launched its brand in Indonesia, the world's fourth most populous country, with the aim of becoming one of the top European brands there until 2016. The model range at the time of the launch consisted of the Duster locally assembled and Koleos and the Manganese RS. Later, the Silo and the Captur were also added. In April 2015, the French government upped their stake in Renault from 15% to 19.73% with the aim of blocking a resolution at the next annual general meeting that could reduce its control over the company. In 2017, the government sold back shares and returned to a 15% stake as agreed with Renault. During 2016, Renault changed position on the viability of small B-segment diesel cars in Europe, as they became significantly more expensive when re-engineered to comply with new emissions regulations as a result of the Volkswagen emissions scandal. Renault believes that all small and some mid-size C segment will no longer be diesels by 2020. However, on Friday, January 13, 2017, Renault shares fell as the Paris prosecutors started an investigation into possible exhaust emissions cheating. The company later recalled 15,000 cars for emission testing and fixing. Renault, along with several other automobile companies, has been accused of manipulating the measurement equipment for NOx pollution from diesel cars. Independent tests carried out by the German car club ADAC proved that under normal driving conditions, diesel vehicles, including the Renault Escape, exceed legal European emission limits for nitrogen oxide NOx by more than 10 times. Renault denied any foul play, stating compliance with French and European standards. In November 2018, Renault CEO Gozin was arrested by Japanese officials for allegedly unreporting his Nissan salary following an internal review conducted by the Japanese company. Renault traded shares fell more than 15% after the arrest was known. After Gozin's arrest, the chief operating officer and company deputy chief Thierry Bolloré became the acting CEO and the board director Philippe Lagaviti the acting chairman. In January 2019, following Gozin's resignation, Renault announced it had appointed Jean-Dominique Senard as chairman and the acting CEO Bolloré as CEO. In October 2019, Bolloré was fired and replaced by Renault CFO Claude Debose as acting CEO Bolloré, and his dismissal was a coup by Senard. In January 2020, Renault announced it had named Italian Luca Di Meo as its new CEO, with him taking his post on July 1st. Delbos was renamed as his deputy. And now we come to the present, which is COVID effects, company and alliance reforms, which has been happening since 2019. In May 2020, Renault announced a cost-cutting plan aimed at eliminating 15,000 jobs worldwide. About 10% of the company's workforce was falling sales and the COVID-19 pandemic. In January 2021, as part of a company revamp, Renault said it would divide its automotive division into 4 business units: Renault, Dacia, and Lada, and Alpine and Mobilize, the latter for the new mobility services. In April 2021, Renault said that its revenues fell by 1.1% from the beginning of 2021 until March, and it will reduce car production and focus on models with higher margins. In November 2022, Renault said its plans to spin off the electric car development into a subsidiary company tentatively called Ampere. It also plans to spin off its powertrain production and development operations, including internal combustion engines and hybrid systems, into a joint venture company named Horse with Geely as co-owner. In January 2023, Renault said it intended to transfer almost 30% of its controlling stake in Nissan to a French trust pending approval by both companies, reducing its shares with voting rights to a minority 15% and, in doing so, making Nissan shares in Renault to gain voting rights. The shareholding and voting ratio of both companies is said to be fixed in the future. The agreement also included Nissan investing and Ampere and projects in various markets. In February 2023, both companies approved the going ahead for the shareholding charge changes. Final details and regulatory clearances for the transaction were set to be completed by the first quarter of 2023, and it would be done by the fourth quarter. The companies also approved joint projects and Nissan's Ampere investment, the share transfer completed in November 2023. Innovations. 1899 Louis Renault driving speed, changing mechanism, and reversing gear. Louis Renault invested a revolutionary direct drive gear with no drive belt, with much better uphill performances. 1963 Renault 8 was the first serial car with four-wheel disc brake system. 1980 first patents for braking distribution device for total adherence. 1988 Carminant, a real-time system for location and weather information. This program received European support from 1988 under the code Eureka EU 55 Carminant. These innovations for the real-time location and human-machine interfaces are included in the Renault R-Link system and Carminant TomTom devices. And there's the history of Renault. How did it become so popular? Well, I think with all those mergers that they did over the years, especially with Chrysler and AMC, I think that's how they became very popular and how they're still well known to this very day. Anyways, with all that being said, I think that's where I'm going to end off this video. Guys, how much you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like button, and also don't forget to subscribe because I visit every single day, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell on my other two channels, the God Again walkthroughs, where I do walkthrough videos, and Dance Plays, where I upload some of the RMVs with the swearing in them, and also some other exclusive content as well. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!